The Amiga computer is a wonderful music tool. Unlike many other personal computers, it has the ability to generate sophisticated sounds and music without the need for any type of external hardware. Computers are quickly becoming the newest tool for worldwide communication. Connecting Paris with Hollywood is a quick dial away. Yet computers themselves have little, if any, emotional power. As machines, they don't do anything. They need software and people to generate those messages. Until recently, computers were usually used for specific business applications. The recent buzz over using computers for video, graphics, animation, and music has led to a new industry term, multimedia. Yet for the most part, animation, graphics, color, and all those multimedia add-ons would only be flash-in-the-pan fads without one vital element, music. Music is now developing a relationship with computers that threatens to generate the biggest explosion of talent, scores, and musical interest since young Mozart wrote his first opera at the age of 6. The Amiga computer is a wonderful music tool. Unlike many other personal computers, it has the ability to generate sophisticated sounds and music without the need for any type of external hardware, except a speaker, of course. You may have heard that the Amiga has some custom chips in it for graphics and animation. True, but did you know there's a custom chip for control of the stereo output of the Amiga as well? Called Paula, this powerful read-only memory chip increases the power of the Amiga substantially. Understanding sound and how it works is an important part of creating music. What is sound? Where does it come from? And how can we as musicians or music lovers manipulate these musical sounds? If you've ever thrown a rock into a pond and watched the ripples move away from where the rock hit the water, you have a good starting point in understanding sound. Sound exists as a series of variations in pressure, whether it's water pressure or air pressure or whatever medium it's moving through. As the rings in a pond, sound travels outward. As it travels, it grows weaker until finally it becomes so weak as to have no audible value. Let's take a look at a simulated sound wave. The horizontal line will represent time, while the vertical line will represent pressure. As the sound continues, the pressure level of the sound may become weaker, resulting in a smaller or weaker sound. By the way, if the sound has a nice pattern and moves up and down with peaks and valleys, it's called a pitched sound. Notice this single peak and valley. This is called a cycle. Typically, sound is discussed as a series of cycles. The most common reference is to cycles per second, or hertz. If a sound has a smaller number of cycles per second, say 30 to 200 cycles per second, it will be low in tone, such as a bass or kick drum sound. If the sound has many thousands of cycles per second, perhaps 10,000 cycles per second, it will be high in frequency. A 10 kilohertz sound will always be higher in tone than a 100 hertz sound. As a matter of reference, the human ear can detect sounds in the range from about 20 hertz to 20 kilohertz. Sounds themselves can reach far beyond these limits. A dog whistle is a good example of a sound that exceeds the human ear. An excellent method of learning about sound is to use the internal sound capabilities of the Amiga. As we learn about manipulating sound, we'll also be learning about the basics of how a synthesizer works. We're working with a synth screen in a popular Amiga music program, Sonics. This program is unique and perfect for this section on sound synthesis, as it allows you to generate sounds and then manipulate them. As we just explained, the waveform determines the type and style of sound to be heard. If the waveform has no pattern, it's called noise. A common and basic waveform is called a sine wave. This is what a sine wave looks like, and this is what it sounds like. Now, notice all of the other switches, buttons, and sliders on the screen. Using these, you can actually program the sine wave to be whatever else you might like to hear. If you've ever adjusted the treble or bass controls on your stereo, you've had some experience with programming sound. By the way, programming music has nothing in common with programming computers. You can become a talented musician without any knowledge of BASIC or Pascal. By the way, when you create a sound program, it's called a patch. This term comes from the first synthesizers that required actual moving of cables from one position to another, as you might do when connecting a video recorder. The term patch has stuck, and so synthesizer programming is called patching. As you take a look at each of the control areas on the screen, you'll note that they have various terms associated with them. LFO, oscillator, and filter are just a few of these. When you make a change in the sound patch, you're changing the parameter of the sound. Volume is the most basic parameter. There are two basic types of parameters. Some use switches and are either on or off, while others use a range of values and are controllable over that range. The sine wave we put up on the screen is a good example of a switch parameter. We can create other parameters by continuing to throw switches like this. In order for the computer or synthesizer to understand the various parameters, numeric steps are used to communicate the changes to the computer's electronics. This numeric stepping is called quantization. For example, take a look at the low-frequency oscillator, or LFO. As the LFO is changed, the computer will receive numeric step changes of information, and the sound will change. But to the ear, the sound is being changed through a range of values. The translation is quantizing. By the way, you would use an LFO for generating effects like vibrato and tremolo. Let's adjust some of the other controls and see what happens to the sound. Now, let's take a look at some of the various instruments that have been created and stored on a disk. You'll see that each one has different parameters, and each is based on a specific type of sound wave. For example, a brassy sound is usually bright and buzzy in nature, so it will be based on a sawtooth waveform. Here's an example of a string sound. Here is a brassy sound. Here's a keyboard sound. Notice the different settings? As you change the patch for each instrument, you are creating a new instrument. Now you can appreciate the power of music synthesis. Listen to this piece, created entirely with sounds within the Amiga. Now that you've learned about the basics of sound and how to create a variety of sounds, let's take a moment and consider what you can do with the Amiga in creating music. You can create sound effects, musical scores for the ear, musical scores on paper, a soundtrack for a video project, musical and sound prompts, a musical alarm clock, a free-form musical instruments. You can build complete songs with sampled sounds, synthesized voices and musical tones, and create sounds and music for software programs. There are a number of different music player software programs on the market. Some also provide other features, which we'll get into later. Two examples include Sonics, which we've already been introduced to, and Deluxe Music, seen here. There are new music players being introduced every day, and if you're interested in using the Amiga for anything musical, it's a good idea to have a music player in your software library. Sound sampling is another important breakthrough for music and musicians. For anyone that uses an Amiga, the power to sample is right at your fingertips.
With sampling, you can take any sound, whether it's percussive, whether it's a musical sound at all, and store into this device, you know, real sounds, non-sounds, anything, and play them back as melodic sounds, as percussive sounds. And in that aspect, I think it opens up a few more doors to composition, performance. It gives the listener something else to listen to.
Earlier, we discussed the need to convert certain changes or steps in parameters into numbers the computer can understand. This quantizing process seems simple when dealing with a synthesizer, as everything is already in the computer. But what about taking a sound from the real world and storing it in the computer? What does that entail? Sampling refers to the ability to take a sound from anywhere around you and input it in a realistic form into the computer for later playback. In order to do this, you need to convert the sound, which exists in a dynamic and analog format, into a numerical or digital format. To do this requires an analog to digital or A to D converter. For the Amiga, you'll need a sampling A to D converter box like this. The most important functions to understand when sampling are resolution and sample rate. The resolution of a sound refers to its accuracy. When dealing with sound and digital conversion, this accuracy is reflected in the number of numeric combinations available. The Amiga samplers typically are an 8-bit resolution device. This means that there are 8-bit digital words that can reproduce sounds. An 8-bit sampler will understand up to 256 different parameters. Any parameter beyond that must be rounded up or down or won't be played at all. As an example of extended resolution, a 12-bit sampler will work with up to 4,096 different parameters. The sample rate refers to the maximum frequency response of a sampled sound. Samples per second are very much like cycles per second, only they refer to the quality of the sound in its dynamic range, not the timbre of the sound as we discussed earlier. The most important requirement for sampling, besides your Amiga, is memory. Of course, you'll need a sampler and something to sample with, but memory will prove to be the most important add-on for quality samples.
I am always finding the need for more memory, internal RAM, more space on a hard disk to store information. And these days they're coming up with some wonderful software that you can actually store complete segments of music in stereo as if it's playing back like a CD. But unfortunately it requires an enormous amount of memory in a hard disk and quite a large amount of memory in the RAM. So, you know, once again, you're constantly expanding. The more they create, the more you have to expand. And, you know, that's something that's hard to keep up with, especially if you're, you know, in a small studio with a small budget.
You can record from any source when sampling. The most common sources are microphones and pre-recorded music. please note that sampling copyrighted pre-recorded music and then reselling it is not legal, so use care when working with pre-recorded sounds.
Well, first of all, the Amiga in the music business, or at least being able to do music, I think is interesting because, you know, it allows you to experiment with audio and, you know, try to make new instrument sounds and new things like that. If you were in the older days of the computers, like the 64, the Commodore 64, and the Ataris, sounds were very computery. In fact, on the IBM PC, you know, I don't even want to talk about it. But you get to the Amiga, and it has sound that's worthwhile. When I've had the Amiga being shown places, I'm almost always confronted with people who aren't familiar with computers coming up and asking if it was playing a radio through its machinery, and they find it very difficult to believe that it's not.
If you record with a microphone, you'll need to also select a microphone that will work with your sampler. There are different styles of mics, so ask your computer or music store which type of microphone is best for you.
Okay, here we have an Amiga MIDI and sampler interface for your computer. It has a input here for a microphone, as well as two inputs here for audio, which could be a cassette deck, a CD player, anything audio, anything that makes noise. And we happen to have a microphone here for you. See, this is used for sampling. All you do is just plug this in here, if I can find the end of the cable. Plug it in just like that, and here's your microphone. You talk into it, hold it up to a speaker, hold it out into the open air, and that's how you get your signal into your sampler. It goes in right in through this microphone, through the interface into your computer.
When using a microphone, make sure all of your connections are in place and your script, if any, is ready. Try a test sample prior to capturing your actual sounds. If there is some distortion, try moving the mic away from the voice or sound source a bit. Sometimes a mic can become overloaded and, as a result, generate distortion. If that isn't the problem, then you'll need to check the cabling of your system and the parameters of the program. Once you're ready to record, jump in and jump out as quickly as you can. Don't waste sample time with dead air. Even if you aren't saying anything, the sample of silence will eat memory. If you do manage to get some unwanted air in there, don't worry too much, as you can edit it out later. Recording from a line source, like a CD player, is completely different from a microphone. Usually you'll be working with two inputs. Often the sample you'll be capturing will be in stereo. And as you probably won't have any control over the level of sound being sent through the cables, you'll need to adjust the recording or sampling level from the software. Always use the highest level possible without distortion. You'll need to experiment a bit with this, but the rule is a good one. A sample recorded at too low of a level will lack definition and quality.
What I've got here, this is a product called Audio Master 3, coming out real soon from Oxy. And what it allows you to do is do sound sampling at approximately 56K, or anywhere up till there. And I just took a compact disc player, plugged it in through an audio sampler, and told it to start sampling. And then using Audio Master's new sequencing abilities, making repeat points within a huge loop, thereby eliminating the majority of the loop and saving a tremendous amount of space.
Once you've recorded the sound, the program will usually display a visual representation of the sound, similar to what we saw earlier when working with synthesizers. If the sound is in stereo, you'll see a separate sound wave for each channel of sound captured. As with most programs, you can edit the samples once recorded.
The way this loop set was made is simply a matter of deciding what parts of the song actually make one consistent looping process. In every song, there's a basic element of looping, a drum beat, a guitar riff that is repeated in every measure. And that's what you have to find in the first place. And in this case, the first area I needed was the beginning where she says, "Rock me Amadeus." And so I simply selected that area, told it to show me the range, and we see this. Now if I say, "Play the display," okay, what we have is it plays the drum beat here, and then "Rock me Amadeus," and then another drum beat where it repeats again. So it's just a matter of setting it so that it repeats right before this drum loop. And we say "Show range," and we just drag it right to the edge of the next drum beat, and "Show all," and then you can say "Play loop," and it gets a constant loop of exactly the same sample every time. Then when you're ready to add the next one, you say "Add," and drag it out to the next portion you want to loop. For sake of time, I'll just make a non-precise loop, but the one we've just set here is... So now we can go back down to the beginning and say to play it. And it goes back to what I had in there earlier. The entire sample that I've got here of Amadeus is approximately 60 loops, 65 loops. You can have up to 99 in a single sample. And the entire process of digitizing and conducting the loops took about 2 hours.
One of the powerful aspects of sampling is the ability to not only edit a sound, but to change its quality via a variety of special effects.
Once you bring the sample in, you have editing controls over it, such as adding echoes and flanging and tuning it various ways. Even flip it backwards and play backmasking. If you want to make something play backwards within Audio Master, it's a simple matter of deciding what area you want to hear backwards and selecting it. In this case, we'll choose again the "Rock Me Amadeus" beginning. You select a range of it, just like I have there, and come up to the menu to Backwards Range. It asks if you're sure, and you say yes. Give it a second. Now if we play it, what we'll get, advanced to where it'll play it a couple times, is this. It's kind of interesting. At any rate, I used it recently on a song on a Duran Duran disc that was recorded at a very high speed, and my wife wanted to know exactly what it was the song said. And so we actually sampled the song, and then I used Audio Master's abilities to slow the waveform down so that we could hear it.
Now that you've heard a variety of instruments, consider this. You can build a sound effects and/or instrument library and use them for videos, stock sounds in games, education or business, or you can combine sounds and build your own music using only sampled noises and instruments. If you want to build a significant library, it's a good idea to store the sounds on floppy disks as opposed to a hard disk. Samples take up a large amount of space, and before you know it, you'll be out of hard disk space. A floppy-based system also has other advantages. You could sell your sounds or rent them by the sound or by the disc. The best part of sampling is that it allows you to express yourself in a completely new format. Even if you have no musical training, you can experiment with various sounds and then combine them to form new sounds. For example, let's listen to some music that was built by sampling sounds with Audio Master, then assembled using Sonics. You decide on the quality. It is said that when Mozart wrote his famous operas, he would sit at a piano and develop melodies, or even more amazing, often sit and write complex pieces of music directly from his thoughts onto paper. Most of us are not able to write music so proficiently. The computer brings new light to the process of musical composition. Today you can use either a keyboard or the computer to score music. Before we get too far into this section, it's important to note that this tape is providing an overview about music and the Amiga. Learning to compose is an intricate and evolved process, and we may cover learning about music in another video. For our purposes here, we'll assume that you know a bit about music, including what notes are and so on.
You can actually write on the computer without using a physical keyboard unit. You're taking notes and painting them or drawing them on the screen. And that is an interesting way to compose because it breaks you out of the routine of using fixed patterns that your hands generally fall into. You know, when you're writing or creating, there's a lot of fixed patterns that you draw from. And also when you're into improvisation, you'll get other patterns that occur in there. But when you're composing with the computer, by drawing or painting these notes on the screen, you can, come up with combinations that you probably wouldn't have come up with because of the way your hands work. So it's a different approach to composition.
The ability to score music on the Amiga shouldn't be taken lightly. Serious compositions can be created, and there is a wealth of music software available and in development all the time. Let's take a look at some of the basic requirements for creating a musical score on the Amiga. For this section of this video, we'll use Deluxe Music, since its strength is composition and it includes some excellent tools. This is the score window in Deluxe Music. On the far left side of the screen is a tools palette, while the bottom of the screen looks like a piano keyboard. The center of the screen, the musical staff, where the composition actually evolves. Let's take a look at some of the tools available for music composition. There are 2 rows of tools in the note palette window. The upper section includes a number of musical notes, including whole notes, half notes, quarter notes, and so on, all the way up to 30-second notes. There are also a series of rest icons, also ranging from a whole rest to a 30-second rest. Underneath the notes, you can change tracks for creating different melodies and harmonies, erase mistakes, and select things with the arrow icon. The bottom section of the note palette window includes a series of musical tools for modifying the various notes and sounds that you will create. Some of these include the ability to set flat or sharp notes, return to a natural, or set the tone with a loud, soft, or very soft passages. As a basic example, let's take a look of what some of the different notes sound like. This is what a whole note in 4/4 or common time pace sounds like. This note is an A. Now let's create 4 whole notes and play that back like this. Now let's change that to 4 quarter notes and 2 whole notes. Hear the difference? Okay, let's load a complete composition and listen to the entire score. The sound is good, but more importantly, the elements that make up that sound are all in front of you on the screen and can be easily edited or modified for different circumstances. The process of selecting music composition software can seem a bit intimidating at first. There are a lot of musically related software packages with some potential confusion about what they do. By creating a list of your needs and requirements, you should be able to narrow the list of acceptable candidates down to some form of acceptable level. When planning a composition music system, the software will make your job either a joy or a horror. And here are some guidelines to use when selecting software. Who are you writing for? If you're writing for others, you'll need some type of quality output for your work, and you'll need to be able to write for a variety of instruments. How will you compose? There are packages that specialize in composition using the computer, and others that feature composition featuring the keyboard. Some offer both, but you check out the capabilities carefully before deciding. Do you want your composition to print out, or do you want it to control a MIDI system? If you're looking for a system that will not only allow you to compose music, but will also allow you to sequence and control a MIDI music system, spend some extra time researching your needs. There are some excellent programs, including those from Dr. T's and Blue Ribbon Bakery, to name a few, but their characteristics vary, so ask plenty of questions prior to opening your checkbook. Will your work ever be used on another computer? This is an often forgotten question that is extremely important if you work in studios or with others. Presently, the software library of Dr. T's is the most widely available on a range of computers. How much previous experience do you have? Often a musician will think about everything he might do and forget that everyone has to start somewhere. It is possible to purchase some software that is so intimidating as to scare you off from the entire process. Remember that most musicians own a variety of software, so start out easy and get a grasp on your strengths prior to making a significant investment. One of the powerful options of scoring with the Amiga is the ability to work with more than one instrument. This will prove very important when scoring an opera or a soundtrack for a motion picture. In any event, being able to write music with more than one instrument expands the musical horizons for any musician. Let's take a brief look at scoring with more than one instrument. For this example, we'll use Sonics again, as it has an easy-to-follow multiple track and instrument display. First of all, let's load a score from disk. When the score is loaded, it loads not only the score, but any computer instrument files that may be associated with the score. Now let's take a look at the score display. Notice the 4 buttons on the screen? Those are the 4 basic tracks for scoring. Take a look at the top of the musical staff and you'll see several little instrument icons. If we scroll through the score, you'll see more of these icons. Each little trumpet icon represents a different musical instrument, so you can write in multiple tracks and use more than one instrument. Okay, let's make sure all of the tracks are turned on and let's listen to the entire score. All right, now let's turn off all of the tracks except one and listen. Now let's turn on 2 instruments and play. As you can see, there are an almost limitless number of options available when you're scoring a piece like this. Here are a few tips to consider when scoring a multiple instrument piece. Write the melody first and use a single instrument. Add the bass line second and once again use a single bass instrument throughout. When adding a chorus, make sure you separate the musical and written sections so you can easily identify them. Add solos and final harmony bits last. You'll need these to give your music a full and complete sound. Save your work often. If your computer has an accident and crashes, you don't want anyone asking why you didn't save your work. Printing is a vital part of scoring if you plan on having your work used by others. While it is possible to print using a dot matrix printer, music is made up of symbols and notes, so a laser-style printer is highly recommended. Most of today's composition programs allow for high-quality output, and some even offer custom fonts to ensure a readable final printed score. There are a number of excellent laser printers on the market, including this Turbo 480 printer from NewGen. The NewGen is extremely versatile, allowing connection with Amigas, Macintosh, and IBM computers. More importantly, the printing matrix exceeds the standard 300 dots per inch found in most laser systems. This Turbo 480 can print 800 by 400 dots per inch, allowing for exceptional and professional results. All in all, there are a number of options to think of when building a music system for composition. Let's take a look at 10 basic tips for better composition results. Composing with the computer will provide new concepts and structure for the author. Computer composition allows for easy editing and instant review of your work. You can learn to compose on an Amiga without spending lots of money, so choose carefully. Some background in music theory is a good idea for the serious composer. Make a list of requirements before buying software. Working with other musicians is an excellent method of collaborating and will increase your learning curve. Don't be afraid to challenge the rules and experiment. You're likely not to damage anything, so let your ideas flow. If you're planning on using MIDI, investigate the various MIDI options prior to selecting a composition program. Don't overbuy. Some software is complex and may be overkill. Always use a high-quality output device when printing a composition. MIDI means Musical Instrument Digital Interface. Since its introduction, the MIDI standard has evolved from a simple multi-synth control code to a widely used sequencing and control system for a variety of applications. A MIDI program is in many ways like a computer program, although more flexible and easily modifiable. A MIDI program, called a patch, could send a simple message, such as play middle C, or it could send a complex set of instructions for a variety of instruments, sound variables, and volume control.
When MIDI first came onto the scene, at first, I was very inquisitive, like, what is this? And then after that, I saw it used, I saw devices hooked up with it, and even though I didn't fully understand it at the time, I thought, hey, this is something that can be extremely useful. You know, now we're beginning to be able to communicate from device to device by different manufacturers without all these little black boxes and patch cords that either worked or didn't. And, you know, to me, it was just a wonderful thing.
Since MIDI is a series of digital instructions, it is ideally suited for use with personal computers, including the Amiga. There are a number of MIDI-related software programs available for the Amiga, including simple music controllers, such as the system found in Sonics, to complex and sophisticated sequencers and composition programs as released by companies like Dr. T's and Blue Ribbon Bakery. MIDI data consists of bits, exactly like much of the other data that computers share. A bit can be either a 1 or a 0. Sending complex messages consists of combining those 1s and 0s into a meaningful string. Many bits are combined into 8-bit strings or 8-bit words. MIDI requires an additional bit at the beginning of a word that says go, and a final bit at the end of a word that tells the receiving device that the word is over. So MIDI information is made up of 10-bit words.
All right, this particular MIDI device here has your standard MIDI connections in, through, and out. Now the MIDI in is simply a plug that allows you to play your synthesizer directly into the computer. It allows the computer to actually take the information in from the synthesizer. The MIDI out is the reverse of that. It allows the information that's been stored on the computer to now go back out and play the synthesizer. Now the MIDI through, which is the third plug, all that does is allow information being played from this synthesizer to come in through this plug and come directly out of this plug, say, to play another synthesizer. It can be stored in the computer at the same time. It doesn't have to be, but it comes through this port, just as the term denotes, through to another port without being altered in any manner.
keyboards available for just a few $100s that will work wonders with MIDI. Other more complex systems often cost thousands. If you want to learn to use a MIDI system, there's a wide range of gear available to you at very affordable prices.
Okay, over here we have a pre-MIDI device, the ARC 2600, one of many synthesizers that existed before the days of MIDI, say back around 83, 84, something like that. It was monophonic. You only play one note at a time, which meant if you played this other note up here, that wouldn't sound until you released the first note. Now all these patch chords here, this is how you made sounds with the unit. You put all these chords together in certain patterns called patches, and would come up with sounds. This is all, today of course, is all done electronically in the newer synthesizers. And as I mentioned before, it was pre-MIDI. It had no MIDI communication system in it at all. So you had to use this little MIDI device here, a MIDI interface, which translates MIDI language into control voltages. And here we have a modern day synthesizer, the Roland D50. As you can see, it's a lot more compact and a little easier to get around on than the ARC 2600, which we previously discussed. Here we have a patch. And all you have to do to change that patch is push another button. Here's another patch. Whereas on the ARC 2600, you'd have to physically take a patch cord out and move it to another location, or a series of patch cords. Here, patching similar to that is done internally, all electronically.
Drum machines are another important consideration for a MIDI system. Many manufacturers build high-quality drum machines for just a few $100s.
Drum machines, or percussive units, as some people refer to them, have come a long way. You can actually get them to the point where you can imitate a drummer. You can really almost fool the listener into thinking that there's an actual drummer playing. The one thing that you are lacking, though, is the spontaneity and human response, the bounce back that you get in a live situation. But, you know, once again, for a compositional tool, you can get most of your ideas down and out by using the computer, so that you've worked out most of these things before you take it down to the rehearsal hall.
Today you can get started with MIDI for less than you might guess.
Today it's amazing. For, say, under $2,000, you could have a complete basic MIDI studio at your disposal, which would include your synthesizer, your rhythm machine or drum machine, your Amiga computer, and a cassette deck. And that's all you really need to get started for the basics. You could write your favorite pop tune. You could create an orchestral score. You could write a piece of country and western music, anything that your heart desires, and you would get complete satisfaction instantaneously. You'd play it, input it into your computer, and then listen to it played back.
If you want to learn more about MIDI, you can order a copy of the MIDI 1.0 detailed specification document from the International MIDI Association at 11857 Hartsook Street, North Hollywood, California, 91607.
MIDI is really not that difficult to learn about. Most of it is described in the little pamphlets and booklets that are just about always given to you with any device you buy that has MIDI in it. And when basically you read the booklets, you hook the devices up, and you just start using it. And it generally works pretty good. You'll come across some strange things occurring occasionally with MIDI, and you either figure them out yourself, which isn't that difficult, or you call up your local music store where you bought the device from, or you call up a friend who's using it and tell them about it.
So now that you've learned a bit about music and the Amiga, it's time to put it to the test. Grab some software and experiment with synthesis. Get a MIDI keyboard and build your own home music studio. Once you get a little involved, the world of music and the Amiga has no limits.